the future can be bright despite the fact that, they are under threat. They've protected it and had to develop long-term plans. And that's going to be similar with a lot of golf courses, to protect them for the future for as long as possible.
Welcome to a very special edition of the Golf Sustainability Podcast. Our guest today has an extremely unique perspective on golf sustainability, as he's got 35 plus years of experience as a renowned international golf course architect. And I'm talking, of course, about Martin Ebert, director of the Mackenzie Ebert design firm. We've got a lot to talk about, and I think what we're going to do is jump right into it. Martin, welcome to the Golf Sustainability Podcast.
Thank you very much, John. Lovely to be here. Thank you.
For those of you, particularly those stateside, that aren't familiar with you personally or the work of Mackenzie Ebert, can you tell us a little about your personal background and about the firm Mackenzie Ebert?
Yeah, sure, John. Well, I don't know how early you want to start, but no, I've been I guess a lover of golf and golf courses and golf landscapes since well before I started this job, obviously. But I guess that was really sparked at university. I attended the University of Cambridge, and played in the golf team and came over on a golf tour of your great country. When was that? 1989. And that was really, it was a game-changing, a life-changing experience, I suppose. I was captain of that team, of that tour, and we put together a fixture list with some help from a lot of very, very, great people. But we had an incredible fixture list, which included Pine Valley, Merion, Shinnecock Hills, National Golf Links, Garden City, Maidstone, Sleepy Hollow, Yale up there, and the Country Club. And it was, it was incredible. So I wanted to do something in golf, I suppose, after that tour, because that was a lot of organization, and didn't really get too many opportunities for a start. But so I ended up being a waiter at Fox Hills Golf and Country Club, where fortunately I met my wife. But then I was thinking, well, maybe I got to do accountancy and get back into golf some way in the future. But then I got a great break with the brother of my current partner, Tom Mackenzie. That was Andy Mackenzie, who I played on the golf team with. And he knew that Tom was working for an English gentleman by the name of Donald Steele. And Donald and Tom were busy with, it was boom time in the golf game. And that gave me an opportunity to start with Donald. Tom had been working with him for 1 year at that point. I knew Donald more as a writer than a golf course designer, but it was great news when I discovered that what they needed help with was golf courses. Now, I didn't have a great training on that front. Tom had studied landscape architecture, so he was a bit more suited to it. But I studied engineering at university, so I think that did help, and ultimately is sort of perhaps maybe fashioned slightly the way we design, with a very, very detailed set of plans is what we believe in. And, maybe that engineering background helped with that. But so it's really, a great opportunity that Donald gave me. And, that built on, I suppose, a golfing experience that really had pretty humble beginnings. It was, no family background of playing the game apart from my uncle. I used to caddy for him every now and again. But it was really watching the game on the television back in the late 70s, early 80s, I suppose, which really sparked my imagination and love of the game.
That's great. And the firm currently, do you have a particular area of focus at Mackenzie Ebert?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the international aspect of it. And I mean, we started our company up in 2005, so we've just celebrated our 20-year anniversary. That's when Donald closed down his company, Donald Steele and Company, and Tom and I decided to set up together as with Mackenzie and Ebert. And that went pretty well to begin with, because obviously we inherited a lot of work of the old company with Donald closing down that practice. But then the crash happened, and we were struggling and wondering where we would get the next client from, the next project from. But gradually, rising again after that very testing period for so many businesses and so many people, gradually we built, project upon project. Before the crash, I suppose there was a lot more new course work. After the crash, it tended to be existing coursework. So I think our attention to those projects grew because we had sort of more time. We didn't have so much of the new coursework. And I think, the heritage courses, heritage clubs, those are the ones that I suppose our love of researching the history of how those courses evolved, that sort of started to bear fruit. And, some great golf courses over on our shores took us on, and gradually we've now ended up advising all of the 10 venues that stage the Open Championship, which is quite something. Hard to believe. Golf Digest have a top 100 outside of the US, and we're advising 33 of the clubs with courses in that ranking, and that includes Hirono in Japan, New South Wales in Australia, Hamilton in Canada. So, our reach now is quite significant. It really is worldwide. So we're working in not all but most continents, and so that existing coursework, I think, has been what we're perhaps known for. Seaside work as well, obviously, with our great links courses over here, where we do, we can quote a number of some of the greatest links: Royal County Down, Portmarnock, Royal Dornoch, all the open venues, as I say, Rye, Royal St George's. So it's been incredible to have the opportunity to learn from those great courses and apply those to our existing coursework, but also our new course projects. When we do have those. So we're very fortunate, I think, in the quality of the projects that we have to work on. We do have quite a bit of work in the States now, so a reasonable amount, and I think that may be the next area where, hopefully, with people being more aware of us, that we'll end up with a few more commissions over there in the States. So that's I suppose where the natural progression would lead to. We hope.
Well, that's an incredibly impressive resume and sense of top 100 course. I mean, 33 of the top 100 courses outside the U.S. is incredible. I don't know this to be a fact, but I'm not sure how many other, if any other designers have that type of depth of experience with world top 100 courses. From our previous conversations and from spending time on your website, it's clear that environmental sustainability is important to you. It's important to the firm. What does golf sustainability mean to you? What's your philosophy on sustainable golf course design?
Well, I think, John, that really starts, for me, I guess, with the traditional design. I suppose, again, we've been so lucky in growing up with courses that, have naturally evolved to a certain extent. They're sites where, golf wanted to exist naturally. And yes, there's been some great architects and architecture practiced on those tracts of land to produce the courses that, we know today. But so I suppose it starts with that traditional design of really trying to respect the land as much as possible to keep the earth movement as low as possible, and if at all possible, just really be almost mowing the grass if there is grass there already. And I'll give you an example of one of those in a moment. But really just trying to work with those great features of the land. Everyone talks about that, but sometimes they talk about it and then they move heaven and earth. Whereas, we really, if we could restrict it to the bare minimum of earth movement, then we would absolutely do that. So to my mind, when you talk about sustainability, that's not disturbing that natural landscape or disturbing it to a minimum level. And then using all of those materials that are on site, trying to restrict how much you bring into to build a golf course. So those are I think the core values for us. And of course, it depends on the site, and some sites need a lot more input than others. So we're aware of that. And if it needs more input, then we have to put more input in. But I guess minimizing the input as much as possible, I think, is probably the key thing for us. And that sort of echoes the words of Dr. Alison Mackenzie, for instance. He had a great quote on that. So yeah, that's where we're following in hopefully those footsteps and trying to produce courses that do respect nature, are a great home for flora and fauna, and the inputs are reduced as much as possible.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned Alistair Mackenzie. I mean, back in his day, they didn't have the equipment or technology that we have available today for moving Earth. So kind of working with what you had was a necessity. And it's interesting to see how sustainability today, as you've referenced, is about getting back to that mindset of doing as little as possible to actually change the land that you're working with. Can you reference a couple of your projects? And it could be recent projects, it could be previous projects that best exemplify the philosophy that you've referenced, Martin.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I mentioned one there where we did just mow the grass, and that is a remarkable project called Askenish up in the Outer Hebrides. So it's you get to Glasgow, and then you got to do a little flight, 40 minutes, 50-minute flight out west, to the island of Benbecula, and Askenish actually sits on the island below it called South Uist. And old Tom Morris went there in 1891 and laid out a golf course, 18 holes, for the landowner, Lady Cathcart. And it disappeared sort of probably after the Second World War. And we were asked with a team of volunteers really to go back and see if we could find where the old course was. And we don't know if we found the old course, but we found what we thought could be holes on that course. Beautiful dune land, by the way, right on the coast. And really there were no funds available. So it really was a question of mowing the grass down and thinking, yeah, that could well have been a green. And I don't imagine there was much shaping carried out when old Tom Morris designed the golf course. So, and we also had the help of the sheep and the cattle to munch it down through the winter grazing of the local crofters. So that is as close, I suppose, to the way golf courses used to be laid out as we could find, really. And even today, now, when was that? That was 2006 we got involved with that. So that's coming up to its 20th anniversary of being restored. And they still don't have an irrigation system, and no prospect of having one, no real need for one in many ways. The greens probably run at 7 or 8 on the stimp meter, if that. But there's a lot of fantastic natural contour throughout those greens, which provide great fun and entertainment. So that is probably the most sustainable and the most true to traditional values that we've been involved with. But then I turned to somewhere like Turnberry and Portrush as well. We had 2 projects there at the same time, getting them both ready. Portrush ready for the 2019 Open, and Turnberry with Mr. Trump having bought the property, converting that into the very best golf course that we could. And I guess the guiding principles on both of those projects was to use root zone for the greens, for the fairways, for the tees, which existed on site, to use the same turf from the greens. So Turnberry, for instance, Donald Trump, he said, okay, what grass are you going to import for this? And we said, well, no, I think we actually want to use the grasses that exist on the greens already. They're acclimatized to it. We just need a better root zone to allow them to be improved over time. And Portrush, for instance, all of the rough vegetation that we were disturbing to build new holes, that was lifted and relayed. So we were preserving all of that great natural rough vegetation, but also it was suiting our needs because we were producing something that was looking mature straight away. So I think those are good examples. We had an incredible project in Sri Lanka. This was back in the days when I worked for Donald Steele and Company, and that was at Victoria near Kandy. And the most incredible landscape next to the Victoria Reservoir. As an inland site, I don't know that there's any more stunning in terms of the vistas throughout the 18 holes. But we came across a site that had so much beautiful topography, rock outcrops. It had beautiful Mara trees, rain trees, just huge, great canopies on them. And we laid this course out and had to, even though the ground was quite challenging in terms of levels and steepness in places, laid the course out with a minimum of earth movement. They really didn't have much machinery. And we only found room for 8 bunkers, for instance. Now, I don't know many designers that would restrict themselves to 8 bunkers on any piece of land, really. So, that was, again, another example of there was so much natural character to the site that we didn't need to put any more bunkers in. And the local people constructed that golf course. They didn't really know what golf was. And as a result, now it's a thriving community. Golf means a lot to the local economy. And it's just, just a wondrous place to go and play a round of golf. It really is so beautiful. So, but again, really producing, and I would say the most sustainable way in terms of using all of the materials that were on site and restricting what was imported to an absolute minimum.
Yeah, great series of projects. I've had the chance to play Turnberry and Askernish. I've not played. The Sri Lanka I haven't played, but Portrush and Turnberry I've had the pleasure of playing. But I've written both. Was that Victoria?
Victoria in Sri Lanka.
In Sri Lanka, okay, yeah. So that's a breadth of experiences in different parts of the world. My impression is that the commitment and value of sustainable golf course development kind of varies from place to place. What's your take on the level of commitment to sustainable golf course design that exists in different parts of the world? Are there some areas that are hyper focused on it, some less focused on it?
Yeah, I think I come back to the fact that where the game started, it really wanted to exist naturally, or it could exist naturally. You think of our great links courses, and as I mentioned, the sheep and the cattle already, just managing to nibble it down to the point, and the rabbits as well, of course, in those days, and still, Askernish is probably would prefer not to have so many rabbits, creating little mini bunkers around the place. But no, it's it really is sort of natural for golf to exist, on the shores of the British Isles and some other places around the world as well. So it makes it very easy. Now, of course, even those courses are becoming more and more manicured now, and irrigation systems are being installed or have been installed for years and years on so many of them. But so there's already that desire to fine tune the maintenance of those golf courses, and that's in a location that really does suit the natural presence of golf. But of course, so many parts of the world need huge inputs to make those golf courses viable, both to be maintainable and so that includes the irrigation of them, the drainage of them. And the pesticides that are required in different areas. So I guess what I always think is that it's been so successful, this game, that it's being forced into places where it doesn't naturally exist, and as a result, then it can't be as sustainable. And then it's a question of, again, doing the minimum to create the right conditions, the best conditions for golf. So we're involved in a beautiful project in Puerto Rico, for instance, and the rainfall at certain times of the year is significant. So the storm drainage has to be sized to cope with those big amounts of rainfall at certain times of the year. But then it has to have a fantastic irrigation system as well. And it's just incredible to think of the cost of those systems, the amount of water that is required to be applied to those golf courses. So that's where it's just the natural conditions mean that it's less easy to be as sustainable as possible, but it's working, and I guess then you come into financial sustainability. Can these courses survive and thrive, given the relatively high costs of maintenance? But so in terms of environmental restrictions, they are tightening up in certain parts of the world, and certainly Europe is probably leading the way on that, I would say. So, we're involved with a great project in Holland at Noordwijk, another great links course right on their coast, beautiful sand dunes, and really one of the main drivers of the project to reconstruct all of the greens is to end up with a different set of grasses on those greens, so that they really don't have to apply the range of pesticides that are already being restricted significantly in that country and others in Europe as well. So I think that's a great example of how, quite rightly, the legislation is tightening up and golf reacting to that, and hopefully still being able to deliver great golf courses in good condition for the golfers, the members and visitors to play. But there's no doubt there are differences. I guess whenever we're in the States, we were always all of our projects over in the States, always very, very aware of wetlands, and that was probably the biggest issue to consider in terms of the constraints of where the holes could be located. So yeah, slightly different focuses in different areas, I think.
Yeah. So many thoughts prompted by your comments, Martin. The regulatory piece is interesting. I didn't make it out to Askernish, but did get to play Machrihanish and Machrihanish Dunes. And I know it wasn't your project. I think it was David McClay Kidd. But when they did Machrihanish Dunes, the local ordinance was that they couldn't move land other than on the tees and greens. And if there was any dirt that was being brought in, it had to be from the local area. And I think the regulatory environment is definitely much more stringent in Europe than it is in the US. Like around pesticide use, there are a couple of dozen pesticides that can be used in Europe, whereas in the States, there are hundreds. But I guess it really does boil down to, as simply as you put it, and it is somewhat obvious, if the nature of the land is suited to golf, then you're going to be way ahead of the game in terms of creating something that's got sustainable features to it. Whereas if you're trying to put a golf course in a desert or create a golf course where the primary purpose is to sell houses around it, you're creating something that's not naturally intuitive to the land, which is going to require more disruption, more land movement, greater need for irrigation. And it sounds like you've got the good fortune of having been able to work on many, many projects that are naturally suited to sustainable development.
Yeah, no, we've been lucky on that front, John. And I mean, we've got one project which we weren't successful in getting, and very beautiful links piece of ground. And I think having the knowledge of how to develop that is really important. So I think there's a chance it may be developed with just pure sand, just not taking advantage of the organic matter that does exist in the topsoil. And so what will that mean in that site? One which really is perfect for golf, but it may mean, if you just go with pure sand, that you've got to, your irrigation system has to be, the water usage has to be so much greater than if you use the natural materials that exist on that site and use that organically enriched topsoil, perhaps cutting it with a bit of sand. But all of a sudden, you've got something to hold the nutrients and the moisture. So, there really are some pitfalls and some dangers in not going about things the right way. So, that's, I think, all the experience that we've had, would hopefully, allows us to make those right decisions with the key agronomists in whichever project we're involved with.
That kind of leads to a topic I want to give you an opportunity to get into in a little more detail. You apparently have a unique relationship with the RNA. You've done work on, I believe, virtually all of the courses in the open rota. What are some of the sustainability concerns that you've come across on those courses in the open rota that you've worked with? I know I'm starting to hear more concerns. And actually, when I had to play North Berwick, there was one tee box and one green where kind of coastal erosion was clearly having an impact on things. What are some of the things that you're coming across in your work for the RNA, including the most recent project that was announced, which is the work that you'll be doing to enhance the old course in preparation for the open there?
Yeah, well, in fact, that work's almost finished. Probably got one more visit in the new year to tie things up, but yeah, quite remarkable to be working on that great example. Well, the home of golf, the the old lady, the old course. So yeah, that's been quite an experience. But again, we've used all of the local materials, lifted turf and put it back down again. That's been an important thing. I think all of those courses that host the Open and the other R&A venue courses. And other Great Links courses as well around our shores. I think virtually all of them, it's this improvement of the grass content in the greens, the fairways, the surrounds. And, you do need irrigation to help with that. When you're overseeding, that then to have the tool of irrigation to help that seed establish and really at that point when you've got a much better sward, then you can turn the irrigation off. So there's another big, at the moment on the old course, the irrigation system is being replaced just to have more control and efficiency with that system. So that's one element. And you touched on the erosion aspect. That's probably, I'd say, the biggest threat to many of our courses. I was up at Royal Aberdeen just before Christmas. It has an incredible front nine. And we're working on some exciting plans, to be honest. We're saying to them that the future can be bright despite the fact that, they are under threat. And the first green, they've protected it with sandbags behind the green on a very steep sand dune cliff face, down to the beach. So hopefully that will stem the erosion for some time. But we've created an alternative green for them and had to develop long-term plans to gradually retreat away from the coastline in their case. And that's going to be similar with a lot of golf courses. Royal North Devon, the oldest course down in England, that again is being seriously threatened in a number of areas. So they're looking at having to rehouse some of the holes. Rising water table that's another aspect with the, not just the erosion aspect and which obviously the rising sea levels contribute to, but they also contribute to rising water table levels. And Royal St David's, a great golf course in the north of Wales. We've this winter raised up the half of the 15th fairway and the 15th green, which was every winter was almost underwater. So, they had to be raised by about 3 feet, to give you some future safeguard to the water levels rising even further. So I think those probably are the key factors to our coastal courses. Some are gaining ground. It's amazing to treat each one separately, and on occasions you see land being regained. And Royal West Norfolk is a fascinating example. Beautiful coastal course in the over on the east of England. And we've got old plans showing old holes that got washed away, and because of a change of the dynamics and the tides and what have you, and a particular sand spit which is now protecting the land, that land has come back again. So we could actually, not that I don't think we're ever going to do it, but we could actually reinstate the old holes that were lost. So it is treating each one on its merits, and certainly there will have to be some work on a number of courses to protect them for the future for as long as possible.
Yeah, fascinating. And this issue of rising water table is a fascinating one. I'm in South Florida. I live 20 minutes from Seminole, and they've got a major renovation project they did the front nine this past summer. They'll do the back nine next summer. But because of this rising water table, they've actually, I think there are half a dozen holes that they've got to raise anywhere from the fairways 18 inches to 3 feet. It's an incredible project. So great perspective and experience on your part there. I want to turn now so I'm relatively new to the golf world, right? 3 years experience and exposure in golf, whereas I had 20 years in corporate sustainability. And in my experience in corporate sustainability, I found things were most successful where there was extensive collaboration. And in the case of the golf industry, it would seem to me there needs to be unanimity of thinking and collaboration with industry associations and organizing bodies, architects, all of the folks involved, all of the stakeholders involved with the game. And tackling this in a couple pieces, let's first talk about associations. How do you interact with key industry associations to kind of advance standards and sustainability, or to support your efforts? And I'm talking about groups like GEO, or European Golf Architects Association, or BIGA, the Superintendents Group. What type of relationship and interaction do you have with associations to advance sustainability?
Well, I mean, you mentioned a few important bodies there, and I think probably it was recognised that golf had to look at itself from within rather than having restrictions imposed upon the industry. So I guess that my memory is that was the sort of birth of the Golf Environment Organization, GEO. And they're doing a great job on that front. I think the RNA now have arrangements, or have had arrangements with them so that the golf courses that host championships would be run under GAO guidelines, so that they are audited from a environmental side of things. And GEO, in fact, I don't know, I've been actually made a sustainable golf champion of GEO, which was a surprise and quite welcome, obviously. But and I think it's more of a recognition, for us as a company, perhaps, rather than me personally, because Tom, my partner, he's been leading the sustainability program of the IGCA. Many years ago, he started that side of things off. So, and I think that particular award was given to me for the work we did on a 9-hole par 3 course at Royal Troon. And again, just reiterating the way that we built that with, just the minimal inputs and using all of the local materials and what have you. So I think it's important that those bodies do, support and educate, really. I suppose that's the most important thing. And we used to take greenkeepers out actually to Askanish to show them, this is how the game used to be. How it started effectively, and the inputs are so minuscule there, and obviously impractical to replicate that throughout the world. But it was just an eye opener for them. So I think that the various educational programs that GEO have, European Institute of Golf Course Architects and BIGA, British Institute of Golf Greenkeepers Association, that they all have, must help enormously. So the more people can understand the issues and try to restrict those inputs, the better, I think. And I think the RNA, they're a driving force in this as well. They mustn't forget their efforts. And so I think, with all of these bodies focusing upon it, then, hopefully some of the, perhaps not whether it's the errors, but it's just, I guess, the way technology provides, different tools and fertilizers and pesticides and what have you, if there needs to be some honest assessment as to how can those inputs be reduced as low as possible, but while still producing the great surfaces to play the game upon. So that tends to sort of come back to traditional values. And there was a great old agronomist called Jim Arthur that he would preach that every day of his life. That was going back to the traditional means of maintaining and building golf courses was his mantra.
Interesting. So at a macro level, there are organizing bodies, and those are some great examples. And I'm a big supporter of GEO. I've had Jonathan Smith on the show, and I think they're doing great work. I'd like to see him more involved in the States, frankly. The other dimension on a macro level would be industry suppliers. What's your sense for the role that they should play in sustainable golf course development, and who do you think are some of the leaders in that, in pushing that? And I'm talking about the irrigation companies, the mower companies, the fertilizer companies.
Yeah, I suppose the water is such a big issue, isn't it, in many parts of the world. So the Toros and the Rainbirds. Rainbird have their intelligent use of water trademark, and Toro with their sustainability commitment. I mean, it makes good sort of business sense, I think, to focus on this, but it's important to back it up with good practice on the ground as well. So, whenever we're working on projects, trying to persuade our clients that having the most efficient irrigation system to reduce the amount of water is, but that could mean a lot more heads. So it can mean more cost at the beginning. But with that aim to target that irrigation to the areas that you really need it. So, all the moisture sensors that are being used now are a great help. I think there's that aspect, and then I think it comes down to as well the use of the most important people or the most qualified people for our site. So one body of consultants that I haven't mentioned so far are ecologists, and we love to have their specialized input on ecology on a site, and first of all to understand what that site contains in terms of value, and where there's potential to improve that value as well. So we think they're key people in the industry as well to make sure that the site with golf on it is hopefully better as a habitat for flora and fauna than a site without golf, which can happen. I mean, we have our SSSI status sites of special scientific interest sites, and certainly it was a great ecologist that's still in practice, Bob Taylor, and I remember him saying that golf courses, the quality of SSSIs that have golf courses on them is higher than the average SSSI. So that sounded good, but you mustn't rest on your laurels and must keep trying to maximize the ecological value of any of our courses, really.
Interesting. Well, that's really good perspective at the macro level, both associations and suppliers. Now, bringing it down to a specific project at the project level, based on your experience, what's the most effective way to get kind of the architect, the builder, the superintendent, and the owner kind of all aligned around doing things as responsibly as possible from a sustainability standpoint on a particular project?
Yeah, and I think, the owner, you mentioned the owner there, I think they are the key. They are the people with the checkbook. Obviously, we need to be trying to persuade them, all the advisors that they would have, hopefully, buy into the same side of things. But the owner's got the checkbook, and so they really need to buy into that. On a practical level, who can have the most influence on that? Well, it would be the superintendent. So we always hope that the superintendent is as ecologically and sustainably minded as possible, because they would hopefully have that influence over the key people within the client's organization to invest in that. And it does take money, as I've just said there on the irrigation front. It might mean having to spend some more on the irrigation system to make sure that it's a more sustainable system. But so I think the owner's the key, but everybody, I guess, needs to play their part in this. Contractors over here, it's great, the investment that some of them are making. I mentioned the rough vegetation that we lift and relay, and the innovation in the tools that they have now to lift it in very large slabs and put it back down again as though it's never been moved is quite something. So I think contractors have their part to play, and having that respect, I suppose, for the landscape and the environment is the key. So as long as that runs through all of the key people in the project, then hopefully the end result can be as sustainable as possible as well. We've got a really interesting project down in Argentina at the moment. Beautiful sand dune country. And the client there, he's got polo pitches, so it's a mixture of polo and golf. And the polo's been there for some time, and he's been irrigating his polo pitches with solar power. Obviously, very flat surfaces, and so the plan is, and it's actually being implemented at the moment, is to irrigate the golf course with solar power as well. So we'll have to see how that goes, whether there's sufficient power. I think there are backup batteries, but again, it's just interesting to see how, on the irrigation front, that's another potential advance. But, obviously it needs a huge amount of power, so it needs a lot of solar panels as well to power that.
Really great points, Martin. And in my corporate sustainability experience, it was really all about power, reducing power use, converting to renewable energy. Whereas here, the focus is really on water. And it's interesting that you mentioned the irrigation systems because it brings to mind back over in corporate where the focus was on power. You could install a more efficient lighting system throughout your facility or throughout your building, but there'd be a much higher upfront cost. But over time, you'd use less energy. It would require less maintenance. You don't have to change bulbs as often. So the total cost of ownership was much more attractive and much more effective with that more expensive upfront system. And I can see the same thing probably taking place going forward in irrigation. You're going to have more efficient systems that are more expensive upfront, but the long-term savings that you'll get from using less water are going to make it pay back, which all gets down to the person that has the pocketbook, which is the owner. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we need. And there are advances in irrigation systems coming forward. The notion that irrigation really hasn't changed that much over the last 50 years. We're just throwing water up in the air and hope it lands in the right places. Things are going to be much more precise. And with the technology that's being developed around sensors, around more targeted systems, that'll hopefully bear fruit. Well, this has been a great take on the whole, on all of the stakeholders and all the folks that have to be involved to really advance sustainable design. You're obviously thinking about a lot this kind of what's next from your point of view. What are the things you're thinking about that you think will become more important going forward in sustainable golf course design?
Well, I'd like to think that that some of the topics that I've talked about would become more prevalent, and that people would, I suppose, design moving less earth, but that's an obvious one, I suppose. But so in terms of what's new out there, I know the irrigation down in Argentina was a fascinating one to hear about, and so if that can be a success and can lead the way, then I think you hit the nail on the head. Really, water is such a key commodity in many parts of the world, not everywhere. Some people seem to have too much, but certainly that in certain places. When you think of the droughts that are experienced in certain places and then the application of huge amounts of water, on those golf courses, then that certainly is something that needs thinking about, just from an overall perspective of life, I suppose. So I think it's just going back to the traditional values in some ways, I think is would be my advice.
Where in Argentina is that project, by the way?
That is about 4 hours south of Buenos Aires, near a town called Pinamar. It's in the district of Buenos Aires and right on the coast. But beautiful. Just the topography there is fantastic.
To this day, the best steak I've ever eaten was in Buenos Aires. I think I'm overdue for a return visit.
Yeah, they're certainly proud of their steak, definitely.
Martin, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking about your background, the work of your firm, and the wide array of projects that you've worked on that you've shared has really been fantastic. I like to wrap up some of my episodes where, we turn things to a more personal note to give the audience a chance to get to know our guests a little further. So a couple things I'd like to ask you. What drives you, Martin?
I suppose creativity is the one word that might define it. It's just so fulfilling to take something and hopefully, make it that much more suitable for its use. But I suppose, so if that's an existing hole or an existing course, then making that even more fascinating for the members and visitors to play. I mean, we had a great experience down in New South Wales in Australia, where Tom, who was leading that project, but we both provided input to the core master plan principles. But we went down there after the members had I don't know, 6 months playing it, and they were so happy with what they had, and so that gave us a lot of a real satisfaction. And we've just been putting together our annual review, which obviously with an annual review every year at the end of the year, and we focus. We said we've really got to focus on the very best photography that we can find, our own and other people's. Kindly allowed us to use some great photography. For me, I think it's producing beautiful looking golf holes, which also play well. They have to be great golf holes as well, but there's so much beauty involved in landscapes and golfing landscapes that that is, I suppose, what drives me is can we create some beautiful looking golf holes and golf courses around the world. So that's probably the key in terms of what drives me.
Great. What's been the biggest challenge that you faced in your career?
Well, right now I think it's playing the game. Struggling to play the game, as you well know.
Oh, come on, we've played together. You played fine.
Oh, I'd love to play a bit better again, but challenge in career-wise, I suppose it's we were very nervous when Donald closed down his company and we had to start up our own. It's such a name-orientated business, and I think maybe based in the UK, our market is so much smaller, so I guess the challenge has been sort of fighting out of that market and impressing people to the point where you get taken on in different countries. If we'd been based in the States, I don't know, it may have been a different story in terms of where we'd be right now. But I think we love where we live and love the life that it gives us. So we're not complaining about that. But I think in terms of a challenge, to become known from little Chichester on the south coast of England is probably a bit more difficult than if we were based in the States. So that's probably the greatest challenge. But anyway, we've enjoyed taking it on.
Well, listen, your work speaks for itself, and hopefully this podcast episode will shine a light on some of the great things you've been doing.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Finally, who's inspired you, Martin?
Well, I think I give credit to my old boss, Donald Steele. He gave me that chance in the golfing world, and he was a great player, played in the Open, played for England, and was a great after dinner speaker, great writer. And then obviously he had his fourth element, I always say, to his career is the golf course architecture. And his principles were based on those very, very traditional values. So I think he's inspired me in that respect. And then I think having the opportunity to work on these incredible courses that I'd say the golden age designers, they are responsible. When you look at that list of the top courses in the world, then there's still a lot of them that are dominated by, Colt McKenzie, and Tom Simpson. And, so it's incredible what they left, because they were really, in my view, they invented the design game, the golf course design game. They were following, people that would put stakes in the ground, and they did, Tom Morris made some changes to courses to improve greens and what have you. But I think it's when, the golden age guys came along that they really invented what was good green shapes, good green surround shapes, good bunkering, good strategy. So, I think, they really are the inspiration to what all of us following have done, because they didn't have that library of courses to review and look at that they created back in their day. So I think they're real key figures of inspiration for me.
That's great. So good mentorship, some real role models, and there's a sense of maintaining the legacy of those folks that I feel is important to you. That's interesting to hear, Martin.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've got a presentation with the golf course architects, and it's amazing how many of them actually were inspired by St Andrews. So maybe I should put that in as a bit of inspiration as well. But even the likes of Charles Blair McDonald, he studied there, and Donald Ross and what have you. So, and it's incredible the link from one architect to another quite often. And I shouldn't miss out sort of Pete Dye as well over in the States in terms of how many great architects in the modern age that he really, I guess, helped on their way. So Tom Doak and Gil Hance and Bill Core, I think. So incredible what handing down, as you say, what we've learned as designers is so important to the future.
Well, listen, that's a great way to wrap this up, Martin. Can't thank you enough for the generous and very open sharing of your experience with me here today. It's been a great conversation, and I look forward to continuing the conversation with you as time goes by. So, thank you very much for being with me here today.
Pleasure. No, thank you very much, John. Thank you for the opportunity.
And to our listeners, thanks very much for joining today on what is really a very, very fascinating conversation about really the roots of sustainable golf course design. It's a topic that's important to me that you'll be hearing a lot more of over the next year. If you enjoyed the episode, please recommend the podcast to your colleagues, your friends, anyone who you think would have an interest in the topic. Check us out on all major social media channels and stay tuned and join us for the next episode of the Golf Sustainability Podcast. Thanks very much for joining me today and have a great day.